Look at a human being honestly, stripped of everything we've built. No claws, no fangs, no fur, not especially fast, not especially strong. By almost every measure that matters in the animal kingdom, we should have been prey, not predator. But there's something stranger than any of that. Something that doesn't show up in a list of physical traits, but explains almost everything else about how we survived. And it isn't buried in theory. It's buried in the ground, in real skeletons, found again and again, across nearly 2 million years of prehistory. Ancient humans were unusually, almost irrationally, kind to each other. Start with the most basic fact of human life. Earth. A human baby is born more helpless than almost any other primate on Earth. A newborn chimpanzee can cling to its mother's fur within hours. A newborn human can't even hold up its own head. For decades, scientists explained this with something called the obstetric dilemma. Walking upright on two legs required the human pelvis to stay relatively narrow. Wide hips are mechanically inefficient for bipedal movement. But a growing brain needed a wider birth canal to pass through safely. Those two pressures pulled in opposite directions. The compromise, the theory goes, was to give birth earlier, before the baby's brain finished developing, producing infants that are helpless for months, sometimes years, after they're born. It's worth noting this exact explanation has been challenged in recent years. Some researchers argue the bigger constraint isn't the width of the pelvis at all, but the sheer metabolic cost of pregnancy on the mother's body. A competing idea called the energetics of gestation hypothesis. The full picture is still being worked out. But either way, the outcome is the same. And it's the outcome that matters here. Human infants are born catastrophically dependent. And that single fact changes everything about what kind of species we had to become. A helpless baby doesn't just need a mother. It needs a group. Researchers studying even earlier ancestors, Australopithecines, walking upright with brains barely a third the size of ours, found evidence that their infants were already being born helpless in this same way, long before modern humans existed. Which means cooperative childcare wasn't a nice cultural bonus that came later. It was baked into the survival math from millions of years back. The upright walking itself, the trait that, along with a larger brain, caused this whole cascade in the first place, came with its own steep cost. Chronic back pain, difficult childbirth, a body plan awkwardly repurposed from four-legged ancestors into something balanced on two narrow points. Every one of these trade-offs points toward the same conclusion. Humans are, structurally, a species built around vulnerability. So how does a species this fragile end up ruling the planet? This is where the empathy comes in, and where the fossil record gets genuinely remarkable. The first case takes us back almost 1.8 million years, to a site called Dmanisi in the Republic of Georgia, the oldest evidence of humans living outside Africa. Among the skulls recovered, there is one researchers simply call the Old Man. He had lost every tooth but one, years before he died. The bone around the empty sockets had fully healed over and resorbed, meaning he survived for a long stretch of his life, essentially unable to chew tough food at all. In a brutal, predator-filled Pleistocene landscape, where saber-toothed cat remains litter the same cave floor. A toothless adult should not have lasted long. Researchers studying the skull argue he likely survived through sustained help from others. Food softened or pre-chewed for him. Protection from predators he could no longer fend off alone. It's considered some of the earliest known evidence of group care in the entire human fossil record. To be fair, not every researcher agrees on how far to take this. One anthropologist who has studied the site directly cautioned that going from tooth loss to proof of compassion is, in her words, something of a leap. She pointed out that even toothless chimpanzees have survived in the wild without help. It's a genuinely open question. But the sheer duration of his survival, in that environment, with that level of impairment, remains hard to fully explain without some form of support. The second case is far more dramatic and far less ambiguous. In a cave called Shanidar in northern Iraq, archaeologists found the skeleton of a Neanderthal man, roughly 45,000 to 70,000 years old, now known as Shanidar 1. His injuries read like a catalog of catastrophe. A fractured skull, a right arm withered and partially amputated, degenerative disease in one leg, and hearing loss severe enough that he was likely functionally deaf. He lived to be roughly 40 to 50 years old, genuinely elderly, for his time and circumstances. A person with his injuries could not hunt, could barely move across rough terrain, could not hear a predator approaching, or his own group shouting a warning. Keeping him alive cost real resources for years, with no productive return by any cold survival calculation. They did it anyway. Researchers who studied his remains describe clear evidence of sustained, direct care. Help with food, with movement, with basic survival. Over a period of years, not days. One of the original excavators called his survival, in his own words, proof that his people were not lacking in compassion. The third case adds yet another data point. Half a world away and tens of thousands of years apart. In 1908, in a cave in Chapelle-aux-Saints, France, excavators uncovered another elderly Neanderthal skeleton, quickly nicknamed the Old Man. He had lost nearly all of his teeth, years before death, with the jawbone healed and resorbed around the empty sockets. Exactly like the Dmanisi skull nearly 1.5 million years earlier. He also suffered from severe arthritis throughout his spine, shoulders, and hip, along with a healed rib fracture and likely significant hearing loss. Researchers examining the skeleton concluded that this individual couldn't have chewed solid food effectively in his final years, and very likely needed his food prepared or softened by others. He also appears to have been deliberately buried. One of the strongest pieces of evidence that Neanderthals treated their dead with intention and ritual, not indifference. 3 discoveries. 3 different times. Nearly 2 million years apart, in one case. 3 different places. 2 different species of human. And the same underlying pattern, over and over. An individual who, by every practical measure, had stopped being useful to the group, who could no longer hunt, fight, forage, or even chew, was kept alive anyway, for years, at real cost to everyone around him. Some researchers who study the evolution of empathy argue this isn't a side effect of human intelligence. It's one of the actual engines of it. Empathy lets one individual model another's pain and need, well enough to act on it before being asked. That's a genuinely rare thing in the animal kingdom. And once a species has helpless infants that take over a decade to become self-sufficient, and injuries that would otherwise mean certain death, empathy stops being a soft, optional virtue. It becomes a hard survival requirement, as load-bearing as any tool or fire, which reframes the entire opening question. Humans didn't survive the ancient world despite being fragile. In a strange, roundabout way, we may have survived because of it. A species that gives birth to helpless infants, that walks upright at the cost of chronic injury, that occasionally loses its teeth, its hearing, or the use of a limb to age or accident. That species only makes it, generation after generation, if it develops a deep, structural commitment to caring for its weakest members. Every other apex predator on Earth got there through claws, speed, size, venom. We got there, in large part, through something closer to love. Not as a nice bonus feature layered on top of survival, but as the actual mechanism of it, written directly into bones that are still being dug out of the ground, one careful cave at a time. The weirdest thing about ancient humans isn't a tool, or a weapon, or a discovery. It's that somewhere in the deep, brutal, resource-scarce reality of prehistoric life, compassion turned out to be one of the most effective survival strategies life on Earth has ever produced.